watching Amitha Verma, creator of Village Antiques, Amitha Verma Furniture Paint, and interior designer. So today I wanted to share with you my thoughts on how I select furniture and antiques. I recently had a fellow antiques dealer, another vendor that we are friends with and work closely with, bring in a piece to show me how excited she was about the latest antique she had acquired. And she prefaced it by telling me it was a beautiful 18th century antique cabinet that had just come in from France, and she was so excited she had gotten this piece as a part of her collection. Well, as soon as I saw the piece, I knew right away it was not an antique. There were many telltale signs that told me it wasn't an antique. So I proceeded to ask this woman, how do you know this was an antique? What makes you think this is an antique? And she told me the person whom she brought it from or purchased it from had told her it was a genuine 18th century piece that had been imported from France. And it really kind of made me think about that old phrase, buyer beware. Anyone can really tell you anything, and they may certainly believe it to be true, but as a buyer, you want to be a little bit educated about the pieces that you're buying. I was able to tell right away that the piece the vendor was showing me was not an antique based on my years of experience and how I've trained my eye to really look for certain qualities and characteristics in antique furniture. This one was a really easy one for me because as soon as I saw the piece, I was able to tell that the piece was primarily constructed with particle board. Now you may have seen particle board. It's really prevalent in a lot of our furniture today. A lot of the pieces that come from IKEA, or some of the new kind of desk systems that you see at Office Max, and maybe some pieces that you have in your own home are made with particle board. Now I'm not saying it's a bad thing it's made with particle board, but particle board was really kind of invented around the 1940s, and it was actually quite expensive, so you really didn't see it trickle down into furniture production into the late 1950s. So right there, that told me right away it was not an antique, which is what this purchaser was led to believe. And it certainly was not 18th century, which means the piece was made in the 1700s because particle board had not been invented yet. So that's how I knew it wasn't an antique. And unfortunately, this person didn't have that experience or knowledge under her belt and just sort of believed what she was led to be told. And again, that may be well and good. You may know you're not dealing with an antique, but if it fits your purposes, it could still be a great product. Today I just wanted to share with you some tips on how to know a good quality construction versus a bad quality construction, and some tips on how to select furniture if you are looking for the characteristics of quality handmade antique heirloom furniture. The first thing I look for when I'm really looking for beautiful quality, antique quality, handmade sorts of pieces is solid wood. Traditionally and historically, beautiful furniture was really constructed with all solid wood parts. So that's really a telltale sign, like I was telling you in the story before, if a piece actually is an antique or vintage, or even really of that sturdy, hardier, solid wood quality that you're probably looking for in a piece that you might want when you're on the hunt for an antique. And behind me is a really good example. Right away you can tell that this piece is made and constructed with different pieces of solid wood. Here's another beautiful example behind me. This piece is a showstopper. It is one of the finest pieces that has come through our shop, and again, I'm drawn to it because I can see the solid wood characteristics of this piece. With the solid wood, you'll see a lot of the original grain of the wood, the knots of the wood, and the nice thing about solid wood is you can just wax it and really bring the piece back to life. It can go from the brinks of despair all the way back to beautiful with just a little bit of TLC. So it's a really wonderful quality to look for. And even if you're going to paint a piece of furniture, solid wood gives you a much better foundation to work with. So whether you're looking for an antique or you're just looking for a good solid piece of furniture, that is one of the things I really look for when I'm looking for a good piece. Is it made of solid wood? thing I like to do when I find a piece where the exterior has what I need for a project or maybe something I want to paint, but it has a good first impression, is I like to open up the piece and take a look and see what's on the inside. So I'm going to open up this drawer and really take a good hard look at the construction of the piece. And here when you open it, you can see that this piece has been kept in really good condition. There is solid wood on the inside, and on the side of the drawer you can really see the construction details, and this is called a dovetail joint. So the piece kind of fits together like a little grid, and that gives your drawer construction the best stability and long-term ability to have wear and tear and use on the piece. So right away I can tell this was definitely something that was made a long time ago and in a more historically accurate way. What I would avoid is if I see pieces with staples down them. That is not an antique or a vintage piece. And then second to that might be something that's glued together. Again, that's not solid construction. That's not the kind of pieces that you would find or would be known as an antique. Now, you will find pieces that have been nailed together. Those do have a little bit of a sturdier composition versus the gluing and the stapling, but if you're really looking for an antique, the best way to look is to look for the dovetail joints or with pegs or mortise and tenon sort of a system. Those are the way antiques were made. Another feature I love to look for when I'm looking for an antique or that quality that I just really want to put into my projects is the hardware. I love finding pieces with the original hardware. Usually in an older piece or an antique piece, all of the hardware was hand forged, handmade, and often the hardware can be worth more than the piece itself. Like if you go antiquing, you'll see sets and collections of hardware that were stripped away from furniture that really kind of lost its luster or really couldn't function anymore. And you can see here how exquisite this beautiful hardware is. It just really adds so much to the carvings that are on this piece. And here you can see these beautiful kiosk cushions. The hardware is magnificent, and within this hardware, this cabinet maker, this furniture maker, is telling the story that went along with the history of this piece. So again, if you're looking for good furniture, if you're trying to find an antique, the hardware will usually tell you a lot about the piece. So if you're looking at a painted piece, the challenge might be a little bit more difficult, but really you follow the same principles. I can tell from the outside that this is a wood piece, and then I do the same thing where I just open up my drawers and take a look at the inside. And here you can see, again, the drawers are made of this really beautiful solid wood. And then again, I just look at my joints outside of the drawer and I see that dovetail detail. So I know I'm working with a really good piece. Another great way I can tell if something is an antique is when I can look at the carvings. If I look at the carvings on the piece and I can tell they're not historically accurate, then I know it's not an antique. It's probably something that's been made a little bit later and has mixed and matched different time periods, which again may not be a bad thing, but if I know what I'm looking for and I know I want a piece that really reflects the French 16th century or early American colonial history, I want to look at qualities such as the carvings. And here's a great example of this very beautiful zinc top table. This is in the style of Louis XV, and during that time frame there was a lot of fun and frolic and enjoying nature and picnics, and you know, you might have seen a lot of the imagery from toile, and that is sort of what the reign of that king and that kingdom represented, and it trickled back down into the style of furniture and the carvings that you saw in furniture. So oftentimes the furniture had beautiful cabriolet legs, which were reminiscent of the hind legs of an animal, which again is a relation to being outdoors. veneers, or you'd see these gorgeous shell motif or tulip motif, and this entire piece tells that same story. We've got the cabriolet legs, we've got the shell motif, we've got the tulip motif, we've got the curves and that organic freedom that goes hand in hand with the reign of the King Louis XV. So I know that this is a historically accurate piece, and this would be something that I'd be willing to invest in and bring into my home or my projects or even my own shop. So when we're talking about furniture construction, I wanted to talk about veneers. Veneers kind of have a bad rap, and they have good and bad qualities. So what a veneer is, it's a very, very thin piece of wood. It's like a sheet of paper, it's very thin, and they have been around forever, for centuries, and have been used for a very long time when producing furniture. Now the reason why they have a bad rap is when you're looking at dining tables or hardwood floors, if you use that really thin piece of paper sort of a application, it doesn't give you a lot of room for error or damage or wear and tear. So for instance, let's say you've got some hardwood floors that have a veneer top, and you decide it's been about 5 or 7 years and the color has changed and your pets and your kids have been all over the floor and it's kind of showing a lot of wear and tear. Sometimes you're not able to sand it down and refinish it and give your floor a whole new life like you would have been able to with a solid wood installation. And the same applies to dining table tops and side tables. Once the veneer gets scratched, you basically have to re-veneer the piece of furniture that you're working with. So that's kind of why veneer has gotten a bad rap, and people say stay away from them and go more for the solid wood. But sometimes you really can't use solid wood in all of your projects. There are definitely some drawbacks to solid wood, like for instance, wood tends to stretch and shrink with the temperature. It can be very heavy, it's not very moldable or flexible, and it's hard to get some of the details that you might want out of solid wood. So while it has all these amazing benefits and character and knots and richness, there are a few drawbacks. So I just wanted to point out a piece where you can see how a veneer really takes a piece and brings it to a whole nother level with artistry and details, and something that you could bring into your home that only veneer can give you. So here we're looking at an antique French nightstand, and here you can see all these beautiful details that have been put onto the front of this piece. This oval, the ribbon, the garland, the basket, the flowers, all of this could only have been made with veneer. So here you can see how beautiful veneer can be and how it can be a benefit to you when you're really looking for an antique piece. So the last two things I look for once I've gone through all my prerequisites are the dimensions of the piece and the price of the piece. When I'm thinking about the dimensions, I have to think about today's use of the piece and how I can place them into today's interiors. Now if you're working with a smaller space, really that might be better off, because some of the antiques that we get to choose from were built for a more smaller scale of person and residence. And if you're working with a larger space, you kind of have to reinvent how things were used to fit those spaces. So right behind me is this beautiful painted commode, and these were traditionally used in foyers or in halls as a standalone piece of furniture. And I live in Houston. If anyone's watching and you're not from Houston, we have really big homes here. They're just spread out because, you know, everything in Texas is bigger. So a lot of times people buy these from us to use as nightstands, which is not what their original intention was. So when I'm looking for pieces, I'm always taking my measuring tape with me whenever I travel. I've got one in my car, one in my bag, and I just keep in mind certain dimensions that I like to use in my projects. So for instance, a nightstand might be 30 to 36 inches wide by about 30 inches high. I really don't want to go too much higher because I want it to be level with my bed, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb when I'm looking for things to put beside or next to a bed. So keep that in mind when you're looking for pieces. Dining tables, they used to be a little bit lower, like right around 27 inches high, 28 inches high, and now we've gone ahead and gone up to 30 inches high. Now there's always fixes you can do if you find a piece that's amazing and it fits all the criteria, but it's a little bit short. Usually you can add a little bit of wood to the bottom of the legs and just raise it up that 1 or 2 inch that you might need, and continue to keep it beautiful and purposeful and bring it into your interiors. And of course, I always consider the price. Everyone's got that dreaded B word, the budget, and I have to consider all the factors of my project, who my customer is, who am I gonna put this project with or this piece with, my own house, and how much I can allocate for a certain piece and how many rooms I'm working on, and all those criteria in place. But my budget is kind of one of my last things that I might consider. I might flip the tag to make sure it's in my budget, but really I want to look at all those other criteria before I even decide, hey, this is a great deal, let me get it. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, you always want to have that phrase in your head, buyer beware. And if it's a piece that you don't care about the history, you don't care about the fact of whether it's an antique or not, it might not matter to you. But if you're really on that hunt for the piece that tells your story, that helps you create your home and your history and brings in a piece of the past or maybe a piece of the future, you want to make sure that you're investing and spending your hard-earned dollars on a great piece. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my guide on how to look for an antique or how to select good quality furniture. I think it's really important to be educated on what to look for and what not to look for. Kind of those red flags that stand out and say, hey, I'm not an antique, because perhaps where you're buying it from or the person you're buying it from may not be quite sure about the history or provenance of the piece. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your stories about finding a great piece, or even an unsuccessful story of how you bought something that maybe didn't turn out to be quite what you expected. And if you really love this video, I'd love for you to share it with a friend. We get so many friends of friends and moms and daughters and sisters and husbands who come in after y'all share my videos, and I really appreciate it, and it is a very big compliment and a great thank you. So please share, like, or leave a comment. Thank you.